Anti-Imperialist Solidarity Meeting in Cuba calls for an end to neoliberal policies. Antigua and Barbuda celebrates the anniversary of its independence from colonial rule. And after 2 weeks of uprising in Chile, we look at how the country has already changed beyond recognition. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is from the South. The Anti-Imperialist Solidarity Meeting for Democracy and Against Neoliberalism is taking place in Havana, Cuba. Over 1,000 delegates from across the world are attending the event, which runs until Sunday. According to organizers, one of the goals of the event is to strengthen the bonds of solidarity between nations and to support the historic struggles of the Palestinian, Sahrawi, and Venezuelan people. Among others, the meeting will also discuss issues threatening the global south, like wars and climate change.
Se siente en esta sala.
We can feel it in this room, the deep commitment to our people's struggle and the solidarity you have for Cuba, for which we are very grateful. The government of Donald Trump is the main threat to global peace and security. We have seen that the philosophy of deprivation does not stop, and it leads to war. The United States continues to interfere in the internal affairs of our nations. Capitalism is unreliable. The capitalist model of endless consumption is irrational and non-sustainable, only generating inequality. It aggravates climate change and is driving us towards our own extinction. As the United States walks away from international accords like the Paris Agreement, we can say that there will be no sustainable development for global South nations, as there can be no sustainable development without social justice.
Our correspondent Nayara Tardo is at the Anti-Imperialist Meeting in Havana.
More than 1,000 delegates are taking part in this anti-imperialist meeting of solidarity for democracy and against neoliberalism being held at Havana's Convention Center. They've called for an end to neoliberal policies in the region. The event opened early on Friday with a tribute to the historic leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro. The Cuban Foreign Minister, Bruno Rodriguez, gave an opening address in which he brought delegates up to date on Cuban foreign policy and on the current situation on the island as a result of the U.S. blockade. He said that Cuba has stopped receiving finance as a result of Washington's measures and is also having difficulty with fuel supplies. However, he said Cuba will not stop supporting peoples who are struggling for their independence. In the afternoon, there is an opening activity taking place with a show entitled Anti-Imperialist Wave, Hands Off Cuba. Delegates are calling for peace and unity in Latin America with songs and other performances. There's also a big mural where people can sign or leave their handprints. After that, there is an anti-imperialist concert in the Barbosa neighborhood of Havana, where delegates get the chance to interact with members of the local community. On Saturday, there will be meetings of the 6 different working groups with a central focus on the challenges facing the region in the face of increasing hostility from the United States government.
Those taking part in the meeting in Havana include leaders and activists from Black liberation and Indigenous movements around the world. Telesur asked some of them why they thought it was important to be there.
Well, it is very important for us and sentimental to be here as Namibian delegation, as Cubans stood beside us during our dark days of liberation struggle to come and pledge our support and solidarity with the people of Cuba, to plead with the international community to come on board and support this cause of justice, to make sure that Cuban people are freed and they are given their freedom of trading, interacting with the rest of the world, to ensure that these sanctions are lifted.
We are standing up to neoliberalism and, the many devastating impacts it's had not only on Indigenous peoples, our peoples, but through the whole network, throughout the whole world. So it's, particularly this region has seen an increase of attacks against human rights, and we just feel like, there's so much power and resistance right here in this conference, but also throughout Latin America, that we feel it's very important to be here, to lend solidarity, and to tell the rest of the world about what the land rights are in Canada for First Nations at this moment.
We're here today to show solidarity, of course, with the people of Cuba, and also for me, understanding that our plight as black folks in fighting for liberation is directly tied to Cuba's fight for liberation. We see Cuba as an African country, and so we see our brothers and sisters here fighting, and we're very much against the embargo that's happening here. So that's why we're here to stand up and fight for what we know is right and for the liberation of all black people.
While the opposition in Bolivia tries to undermine the results of this month's elections, President Evo Morales is getting on with the job of governing. In the department of Cochabamba, Morales opened an irrigation canal to serve rural communities. He criticized what he called the right's attempts to stage a coup in order to privatize Bolivia's natural resources.
Carlos Mesa, you are trying to take us back to the past, burning down electoral offices in Pando, Potosí and Chuquisaca. They tried to stop the votes of the campesinos from being counted, but with the efforts of the electoral authorities, we still won by more than 10%. Now they refuse to recognize the result. How should we understand this resort to racism and hatred? Brothers and sisters, they cannot accept that we, the social movements and campesinos, can govern better than them. That is why they envy us.
Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says there was no cover-up by him or his government in the matter surrounding allegations of sexual harassment against former Minister of Sport and Youth Affairs, Daryl Smith.
What I had to do, I have done, and I did that early, before this report, which was to use the authority I had, the authority to appoint Mr. Smith. He was appointed, and the same authority, he was dismissed. I know of no other sanction that I could apply to Mr. Smith as Prime Minister dealing with a minister. The ultimate sanction had been applied. With respect to the report and its use and its uselessness, that is now a singular legal matter. And the one thing I don't do in law is advise myself. I am not a lawyer. You all may know I'm a geologist, I'm also a farmer. But I am not a lawyer, and I do not advise myself in law. And when I get legal advice that this report is not usable, I then have nothing to do with it.
Antigua Barbuda is celebrating its 38th anniversary of independence from British rule. The event was kicked off with a military parade before head of state and representative of the Queen, Governor General Rodney Williams. If or when Antigua becomes a republic, then they will have a president. For the past week, the Twin Island nation hosted competitions, marches, expos, and food affairs in the lead-up to the big day. Antigua gained independence on November 1st, 1981, when for the first time in 328 years, the Union Jack was lowered and replaced with the Antiguan flag, and then the Antigua national anthem was sung.
Independence for a small nation such as ours is a fragile plant. It requires continuous nurturing to withstand battering forces, external and internal, that could weaken or extinguish it. That is why none of us should play in the hands of those who would encourage the destruction of our state and the well-being of our people so that they can rule over its ruins. There is a place for political disagreement and dissent. But all of us must know where the line is drawn between political disagreement and national anarchy. Today, therefore, on this 38th anniversary of our country's independence, as one people, one nation with a common destiny, I urge that we deafen our ears to the siren songs of disunity and discord that will sink our ship of state on the rocks of disaster.
Coming up after the break, Mexicans join millions around the world for celebrating the Day of the Dead. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Chile's massive uprising against the neoliberal system has now been ongoing for 2 weeks. It has brought to the surface the festering wounds of a country that liked to present itself as an oasis of prosperity and stability. Alejandro Kirk looks back.
Here everyone has a story to tell of something that kept them from sleeping, but they've been bottling up, until it occurred to someone in government to put up the Santiago subway fares by 30 pesos, and school students decided not to pay. Children are like that, daring and disobedient. Then this gentleman decided to take the piss.
Anyone who leaves home earlier and takes the subway at 7 in the morning can get a lower fare, so it's possible to have early risers with cheaper tickets.
The president thought the best solution was to declare war.
Estamos en guerra.
We are at war with a powerful, implacable enemy who doesn't respect anything or anyone, who is ready to use violence and commit crimes with no limits.
And war it was, complete with atrocities that drew international concern.
Many people have been injured. The former health minister admitted a few days ago that there were more than 30,500 injured patients, and we have registered more than 130 people with serious eye injuries. Every day, we are receiving about 12 new patients with grave damage to one of their eyes.
We believe that 25 people have been killed in the protest. More than 700 people have been treated in hospitals, most of them with rubber bullet wounds. There must be twice that number who don't want to go to hospital because they know that the doctors have been ordered to report all cases. So many people are afraid they could be arrested if they seek treatment.
There was never any clean out of the army, the police, or the state apparatus. And we are seeing the results in the repression now. We have met more than 30 human rights organizations. I coordinate human rights issues for the European left, and we've seen reports of torture, clandestine torture centers, disappeared people, rape, electric shocks, and murders. What more has to happen before the world stops looking the other way, pays attention to Chile, and says stop?
Who was it that briefed the president on the day he said on national TV that we were at war against a powerful enemy? Who told him that? There's a chain involved here. Someone spread that idea. Did the intelligence services tell him that? What were they preparing?
Whoever it was who told Piñera about a war on criminals later told him about an unstoppable avalanche filling the streets across the country. So yesterday's vandals became citizens with genuine grievances.
Given people's legitimate needs and demands, we have listened with care and humility.
What the government is doing is offering minute increases in wages and pensions, but without touching the model itself. That is the political and ideological message coming from the government. But we need to change the rules of the game, and that means a new constitution, where the rules can be debated democratically by the whole society, and not just by the same old elite.
The mainstream media danced to the official tune. Workers at some TV channels complained they were being fed the news by the Ministry of the Interior.
The calls from the ministry are terrible. They should be ignored because they encourage self-censorship. I don't want to think that the journalist colleagues are deliberately playing along with this, but it has to do with bad journalistic practices. There are very few media today that can really open up to the citizens and understand that the center of the story now is not those small groups who carry out acts of vandalism, but the huge mass of people who have taken part in the most spectacular demonstrations this country has ever seen.
Although leaderless, the torrent of demands began to coalesce. The Social Unity Coordination, made up of 70 organizations, began cautiously to take a lead.
What we propose is, first, discussion of a minimum wage of not less than 500,000 pesos net, the right to collective bargaining and genuine right to strike. 3. A minimum pension equivalent to the minimum wage we are proposing. 4. Price controls on basic services. including water, electricity, gas, cable, and internet. 5. Decent public transport. 6. A reduced working day. 7. Improved health care, education, housing, and social rights. 8. Human rights. 9. Immediate rejection of the TPP. 10. A new budget for 2020. And 11. A new constitution through a constituent assembly.
Santiago is living through one of those intense, fleeting moments when reality breaks all the rules. Leaving behind all timidity, everyone wants to talk in this open city. The walls become a blackboard as community assemblies, without asking anyone's permission, draw up a new constitution.
Cristian Inostroza y Alejandro Kirk, Telesur, Santiago de Chile.
Moving on, students took to the streets of Bogotá, Colombia on Thursday to demand that the government provides more resources for education. The protesters say that public universities are falling apart and that the teachers have not been paid for a number of months. They also condemned widespread corruption in the institutions and called on authorities to step in.
People can learn from us, and they can see that our protest is righteous. They can inform themselves, and they can also join the protest and suddenly work together as Chile and Ecuador are doing right now.
Mexicans have joined millions around the world who are celebrating the Day of the Dead with vigils and homemade altars. This year's observance comes very close to the 500th anniversary of the October 18th massacre of thousands of indigenous people at Cholula, just east of Mexico City. Meanwhile, during the two-day event, families visit the graves of their loved ones, bringing offerings of flowers, food, photos, and mementos. According to tradition, the gates of heaven are open at midnight on October 31st, and the spirits of children can rejoin their families for 24 hours.
I come to see my grandson every 15 days, and even more around this time. I can't swallow the fact that his life has been taken. I feel sick.
I believe our traditions are among the most beautiful, and it's a beautiful memory the way we remember them, and for them to know that even if they are not with us, we have the memory of the way they were, their essence.
The Festival of the Dead has also kicked off in Haiti, where the two-day event is rooted in voodoo traditions. People gathered at the oldest grave at Port-au-Prince's National Cemetery, which tradition holds is home of the spirit of Baron Samedi, the guardian of the dead. Their offerings of food and drink are made to the ancestors. During the ceremony, the Iwa spirits make their presence known by mounting or possessing participants. Voodoo, a blend of Christian and African religions, evolved in the 17th century when colonialists brought slaves to Haiti from West Africa.
When we look at this year's celebration, things are not good because of the political problems in the country.
We all will put our heads together because we cannot kill each other. We must put our heads together to see where we go. Haiti cannot perish. Haiti is ours. The people that are here are all Haitians. So we must put our heads together so we can live.
Coming up, tens of thousands march in Pakistan's capital, calling on Prime Minister Imran Khan to resign. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Tens of thousands have marched alongside opposition supporters in Pakistan's capital, calling on Prime Minister Imran Khan to resign. As the first day of demonstrations stretched into the night, massive crowds flooded the streets. The opposition says the government is illegitimate and is being propped up by the military. This Freedom March is the first major challenge to Khan's administration and economic challenges and double-digit inflation. Protesters have threatened to intensify their action if the PM does not step down in 48 hours. As anti-government protests enter their second month in Iraq, the country's top cleric warned foreign actors against interfering. Security forces have violently repressed protesters, with 250 dead so far. The demonstrations have evolved since October 1st from rage over corruption and unemployment to demands for a total regime change. They've also condemned paramilitary forces who've sparked fears of a confrontation with the main protest.
The protests are communal and lack any foreign intervention. Whoever said that there's foreign intervention in the protests is the one who is foreign and outside the law of Islam.
The members of the government and Iraqi rule are all thieves, from Prime Minister Adel Abdel Mahdi to al-Maliki since 2003 until now. What have you accomplished? You have done nothing. You destroyed us.
Thousands have gathered in Algeria's capital for a mass rally as the nation celebrates the 65th anniversary of the war that won its independence from France. Protesters took over the streets outside the Grand Poste building in downtown Algiers by early afternoon to demand a new revolution. They chanted Algeria will take back its independence and the people want their independence. Since February 22nd, demonstrations have occurred for 37 consecutive Fridays. Police were deployed in force, making several arrests in the morning. The Algiers metro was closed and all trains to the capital cancelled in a bid to keep numbers down. New fires have broken out in California and the United States, forcing the evacuation of at least 7,000 people. Hundreds of firefighters and water-dropping helicopters were deployed to fight 3 new massive fires in San Bernardino, Riverside County, and Ventura County. The governor of California declared a statewide state of emergency earlier in the week, as wildfires, which have intensified by strong winds, have continued to ravage various regions. November is Caribbean Tourism Month, and the diverse cultures and experiences which personify the region are being celebrated under the theme Building a Caribbean Tourism Legacy through Festivals. This year, the Caribbean has recorded strong growth in the sector despite some extreme weather events. Arrivals to the wider region were up by 12% in the first quarter of 2019, the region's highest growth rate in years. That included just over 9 million international tourist arrivals in the first 3 months of 2019. And finally, South Africans are looking forward to Saturday's Rugby World Cup final. That is because the national team, known as the Springboks, is hoping for a win against England. Our correspondent Matuba Balachia takes a look at the politics behind the game of rugby in South Africa.
The 1995 Rugby World Cup memories have brought nostalgia in the now racially polarized South Africa. The country's national rugby team could not have chosen a better time to win the World Cup. It was just over a year into Nelson Mandela's Rainbow Nation project, uniting people of all races in the country. Sports has always been the one thing that united South Africans throughout the years. It's now 2019 and the Springboks, as the rugby team is affectionately known here in South Africa, will launch their bid to win the Rugby World Cup against former colonial master England in Japan. Mandela's Rainbow Nation is no more, but government is still pulling all the stops to get South Africans behind the team.
Well, you've got 57 million South Africans standing behind you.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate the call and the support. It really means a lot to us on the team. And yeah, we'll do our best tomorrow to make you guys proud like we have been, and hopefully see you in the final.
Well, I am coming to the final. I am coming to lift that Webb Ellis trophy with you. So make sure that you book my ticket to the final. I'm going to be there.
The team managers were strategic and selected a black man to lead the team as captain. The number of black players in the Springbok team has been a debate that divided the country. It's arguably the one national team that hasn't transformed in post-apartheid South Africa. The one thing they are credited for by some commentators is their passion when singing the national anthem, which is divided into 4 of the official languages. But there's another debate that English and Afrikaans should not have been added to the anthem. The argument being that they are languages of the oppressor. While that debate rages on, all eyes will be on the team on Saturday with the hope they will bring the Webb Ellis Trophy to South Africa. Matuba Mahlachi for Telesur in Pretoria, South Africa.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.
为了保持身体健康